You know, it's taken me this long to realize that the name Poof would be considered offensive. I grew up in the UK, I should have figured. So the brand new Fairly OddParents sequel series, A New Wish, has continued trucking along since that initial review I did of the first batch of episodes a month ago. And as of now, a majority of the show has aired. I still plan on getting out a giant review of the entire thing once it finally ends, but something I want to talk about was how genuinely shocking it's been to see the show blowing up all over social media. And for the first time in like 15 years with this franchise, it's actually in a positive way. Yeah, New Wish has pretty quickly built up a sizable following. Who knows how many of these folks are actually supporting the series and not just watching clips re-uploaded to Twitter and TikTok, but people are enjoying it, and I guess that's what matters most, I think. And it's pretty evident that the rise in popularity is down to two factors. The first being that, since it's airing straight to TV and not being dumped all at once on a streaming service nobody has, it's allowed the show much more breathing room to draw people's attention. When you're airing a new episode almost every day for a month and a half, it, unsurprisingly, results in a month and a half of near constant discussion. I don't think folks would be talking about this show nearly as much if it were all dropped in a single day. It gives you time to take in each episode and appreciate it instead of immediately moving on to the next like it's constant slop. Now, if only we could start doing this for streaming so there are people to actually watch the show. And the second, the much larger factor here, let's be real, being A New Wish frequently roping in characters from the original series, showing that there's a surprising amount of nostalgia for the Fairly OddParents. With all the hatred flung towards anything the show had done past season 5, it's sometimes easy to forget that this was like the second biggest kids show on TV for years. Because of that, even the mere return of a less popular character like AJ is being met with monstrous applause. Speaking of monstrous, why does he look like that? See, like I mentioned near the end of my last video, I didn't really see many people talking about this show aside from the same few diehard Fairly OddParents fans, all 5 of us. But that all suddenly changed with one moment that skyrocketed the series into public consciousness.
Miserable? Hey kid, I'm Poof. Well, at least I was. I changed my name to Peri.
Yeah, in a shocking turn of events, well, shocking to people who didn't have folks spamming them with the leaked pitch Bible last year, thanks, Cosmo and Wanda's baby Poof has made his grand return to the franchise after being all but forgotten in not only the previous sequel series, but also towards the end of the original show altogether. They sent him off to school, made him talk just like Timmy for some reason, turned him into Trump for a second, it's a mess, watch the ranking. But suddenly everyone is now on the edge of their seats, waiting to see which character is going to return next. Crocker, AJ, Vicky, I think that's Cupid, gross. I wasn't sure what to think when I heard they'd be reintroducing classic characters to the show. In some ways, it does tickle that dopamine in my brain that just wants to see old Fairly OddParents characters in current year. Something it seems the staff became aware of too, some of these are as blatant as can be. Not to mention, you'd hope with a new series they'd make sure not to overly rely on elements from the previous. You know, you don't want a case where people are only interested in watching your show when it's referencing stuff from their childhood. But upon watching these episodes, I came to the realization that when it comes to cartoon sequels, A New Wish really went about this in the best way possible. And that the return of older elements never feels like it takes away from their own original characters and storylines. Something that easily could have fallen to the wayside in favor of shoving the nostalgia down your throat. And so I wanted to take some time today to go over how A New Wish goes over its treatment of the Fairly OddParents legacy characters and how, in a way, it almost redeems what the series later became. How they're taking elements from all over the franchise instead of just the parts people liked. Also, just to stress this as much as possible, in this video I'm only going to be focusing on the reintroductions of stuff from the original Fairly OddParents. This isn't a review of the show or anything, I have a much bigger video planned for that once the season ends, so subscribe for that and stuff. Again, just to get it out there, I do have some issues with the series, not a huge fan of everything it does, but you can watch my first impressions video if you want a greater sense of what those are. Either way, let's get into it. Before the characters themselves, though, something I wanted to point out that I appreciate a lot is that Poof God, it is so hard to call him Peri. Peri's introduction in the series doesn't come until the 17th episode. Before then, the most we have gotten from the original show was the reappearance of minor characters like Father Time, them using the terrible Timmy Secret Wish special where he reveals that he froze time for 50 years as some lame meta-commentary about none of the characters ever aging that I still see all over TikTok like it's some big reveal and not a shitty reading strat. Sorry you had to see that. They used that conflict as a way to now establish that any wish relating to time needs to go through Father Time. Stuff like that does an excellent job in opening up the world more and puts our new god kid Hazel in more situations where she has to interact with other magical beings. That was an incredibly smart decision. Anyways, because they wait so long before introducing any major characters from the original, it gives the series a solid half a season to ease old and new viewers into this slightly different world. With shows nowadays not getting anywhere near the amount of episodes that they once did, there's gotta be some kind of pressure on the staff's part to rush through your story and make sure it gets all of it out there before the imminent threat of cancellation, which oftentimes can result in a show's storyline feeling super rushed and underdeveloped, like they're only capable of painting the broad strokes of what they want to do instead of the full picture. It's the kind of thing that makes you appreciate stuff like the more laid-back, tiny episodes of Steven Universe. We get to see the characters in some lower-stakes situations, and therefore, not only is there some contrast for when shit gets real, but we've also had the time to grow closer to these guys and care more about whatever plight it is they're facing. And that's what brings us to Peri, the first major shakeup in the series. They could have easily just had an episode where we see Cosmo and Wanda meet him in Fairy World or something, Hazel gets to say hi, they have a little adventure, all's well that ends well. But instead, they go a step further and integrate him into the small arc they've already been setting up with the new character, Dev. He's a dick.
On your watch. Do they also tell time? No.
While initially being introduced as nothing more than a one-note asshole Hazel has to deal with at school, over the course of the season the two grow closer together as we learn that a large reason why Dev is the way he is a result of his father's neglect. And so after a fight between he and Hazel, he becomes a prime candidate for his own fairy godparent. If anything, he warrants one more. It seems like he's by far become the fan favorite character here. He's basically Remy Bucksaplenty with more depth. There are a lot of similarities between Remy and he, as a matter of fact. I mean, the reason for having godparents is basically the exact same. Only difference is now that we have a show where the characters are a little less one-note, it actually allows them to do more stuff with the concept of two kids having godparents, especially in the following episodes where both of their secrets are revealed to each other. Cosmo, Wanda, and Peri finally being reunited, which was nice to see, even if Peri's reason for wanting to avoid them is a tad forced. I really love Peri's character design. It's the perfect culmination of Cosmo and Wanda while avoiding the bad DeviantArt fanfiction it easily could have fallen into. Wait a second. I'm also a big fan of his voice, leaning into something more similar to Cosmo's personality from the Oh Yeah cartoon shorts. That was for sure a clever compromise. See, because Remy lost his fairy in his very first episode, it resulted in a lot of missed potential within he and Timmy's rivalry. Something they quickly realized as they just gave him one Decimo back right after. But even then, he was severely underutilized. This isn't even really about Remy, as again his character is pretty one note, but just the concept of Timmy interacting with other kids who have fairies. And because of that, I think it was a smart move for this show to go in a different direction and start splitting the attention between Hazel and Dev at times. It reminded me a lot of the dynamic between Timmy and Chloe in the later seasons. But like, good. If anything, it finally made me see the potential Chloe as a character had. The issue there, of course, came when Cosmo and Wanda are now being shared between the two, meaning each of the characters has to be in every episode, which limits things a bit. I think instead of having them be shared between the two, perhaps it would have been cooler to have Timmy lose a godparent. You know, it was always weird that he had two. What if one day Cosmo just disappeared and Wanda couldn't explain why, before eventually Timmy finds out that he got reassigned to Chloe? If this were like the early seasons, perhaps there could have been a more serialized approach to this, where Timmy and Chloe are now forced to spend time with each other, butting heads initially before slowly growing closer over the course of an entire season. And then that could lead to some big finale where the two of them then agree to share godparents. I don't know. Wishful thinking and all, I don't know, I think it could have been fun. What I'm getting at is, A New Wish's way of handling things is really showing me how much more could have been done in the original series if they didn't opt to make it a lame sitcom for the final few seasons. Peri being here allows Dev to join in on more adventures, and gives Hazel someone more on her level to interact with. Again, in the original, Timmy's regular and fairy life always felt super separated to the point where they forget his friends existed a lot of the time. Quite literally forgot they existed by the end of its run. And so certain decisions like reintroducing Peri and even having Cosmo and Wanda have the front of Hazel's human neighbors allows these worlds to blend together way more frequently. Speaking of Timmy's friends, Kingpin.
It's not always about the money, Hazel. Okay, you can cut that out if you want, I'm sorry.
Gonna go out on a limb and say AJ was nobody's favorite Fairly OddParents character or anything. He wasn't bad, but a little bland. Especially compared to Chester. I mean, have you tried Chester O's, dude? Hell, they even dedicated one of their specials to him, which I couldn't imagine them being able to do with AJ. And while we still don't have an idea of how much he's gonna reappear in what little of the season we have left, I like that they bring him back as a way of expanding the world more, us learning about how he's founded the Galax Institute, which investigates the paranormal. Also just so happens to be where Hazel's dad got a job teaching at, the whole reason they moved to this new town in the first place.
Anthony James Jr. won't be present. He founded the Galax Institute when he was just 10 years old.
AJ doesn't do much other than that, he's pretty interchangeable, but again, it's a neat bit of world building, and I like that they bothered bringing back his voice actor from back in the day. The one thing I'm not a massive fan of when it comes to all this is that AJ and the Galax Institute and Hazel's dad by proxy, being a part of this massive organization that investigates the paranormal, kinda makes Crocker less special. Oh yeah.
Hey, Denzel Crocker.
Should I know what that means?
I suppose not.
Crocker also shows up in this series as an elderly man who's since moved on from teaching at Dimsdale Elementary to try and join the Galax Institute as, well, you know, they're basically all he could have ever wanted in the original. Him no longer being the sole person to believe in and seeking out magic doesn't ruin him. If anything, I think it could have worked really well if there were more of an established cause and effect. Like what AJ experienced in being so close to Timmy when he had godparents was what made him interested in the paranormal or something. I don't know, you could have found some kind of narrative way for it to make sense. Didn't the original series have an entire episode about AJ and Chester going on an investigation and almost figuring out Timmy's secret? There you go, easy. By far, Crocker's the most needless addition to the show, but at the same time, I think they do a good enough job at explaining to you his motivation. You know, not every character needs some grand, epic reason as to why they're returning. And having a character who's actually suspicious of Hazel and trying to capture her fairies is an easy but effective way to build some stakes. We literally have humans staring and reacting to the fairies in this show, which is an occasionally annoying oversight, so it's nice when they do remember that these guys are meant to be kept a secret. Who knows how often Crocker will come back in the future, but I can't imagine it'll be much, which is why I think this is fine. The character was run into the ground, there's not much more to do with him, unless they wanted to go in a drastically different direction and try to make him more sympathetic or something. Maybe Hazel tries to help him redeem himself, who knows, I wouldn't be shocked. And the moment where he brings up Timmy was pretty fun, even if just an easy reference.
I used to terrorize with the pink hat. What was his name? Tooby Trombone.
Quite possibly the biggest change to a returning character had to have been Cupid, for obvious reasons.
And find me the dope who is responsible for this latte. It's fabulous.
He's gay, get it? On its own, I can see some folks being upset by this. I mean, Cupid here is practically an entirely different character. New design, new voice, shit in his pants. Didn't need to see that. And while I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with presenting a gay character as more flamboyant, like, surely there are gay people who act like that. I think the issue more so comes from this being treated as his only real character trait in the original, a direct result of how shallow a lot of the characters are in that show. Especially because you have a character whose whole thing is dealing with love, so making him a gay stereotype is a little obvious. With that being the case, I'm actually glad they decided to completely redesign him. If you're gonna go through all these lengths to change his fundamentals, then you might as well not even pretend he has any connotations to the original. Even if I do miss Tom Kenny's performance, his voice was pretty infectious. If dated, I get it. I think what mainly makes up for this is that Cupid's introductory episode is one of the best from the first season so far, in my opinion, as Hazel takes her parents back to the day they first met for their anniversary, now having to make sure that everything plays out the same way while Cupid attempts to sabotage her by bringing in one of her mom's old flames. They set him up as more of an antagonist, which is a different but welcome direction to take him in. I like his dumb baby walk. A character in which they took the opposite approach in would have to have been the recently revealed Vicky, Timmy's once babysitter, but now he's just a general children's entertainer. She's basically the same, although they toned down a lot of her more sadistic tendencies. I don't think we're gonna get any scenes of her chasing Hazel with a knife. How the hell did they get away with that? I can see a couple people out there disappointed that she's by far the character to get the most minimal changes made to her design. It's really just a pair of eye bags and that's it. But it works. I imagine it would have been a tad strange if they went for something more akin to her 18-year-old design from Channel Chasers. People would have had a fucking field day. All Vicky needed to be was a copy-paste of how she was in the old series. And it's for that reason I think she's the one who translated to this new show the best. She tortures kids in a show where the kids can basically fight back. It pretty much writes itself. But even then, they go a step further. See, earlier in the series, we get the amazing reveal that Dev's dad is Deal Dimmadome, heir to the Dimsdale Dimmadome fortune. A really surprising callback to Nectar the Odds, where Timmy and Vicky both run rival lemonade stands so we can get a ticket to Crash Nebula. On ice. There's a gag in there about her kidnapping kids and keeping them underground to make her lemonade, in which we see at the end that one of these kids' parents is none other than Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. I was genuinely not expecting them to go this far, but Vicky makes a reference to this, which therefore gives her greater motivation to want to torture Dev as she in some way feels entitled to the success given to his dad.
Heard of him? I made him! He was the laziest worker in my lemonade stand!
I know a lot of this can come off as cheap fan service, but I really think it all comes together in how they take things a step further with the references. It's usually an aid of serving some kind of incitement for these characters. But on the other hand, I don't know, I like the fan service. I like that they replay Icky Vicky. It's like I'm torn between two sides of myself. The side that wants this stuff to be in service of something, and the side that finds it sweet and gratifying that Cosmo and Wanda finally got to call out Vicky to her face, along with Peri showing that he's clearly been traumatized by her as a baby.
And you're in big trouble for being so mean to Timmy! I mean Dev.
So I do want to make sure I stress this, because I'm not typically an advocate of a show doing references for the sake of references. I know Wish's returning elements aren't good because of nostalgia, Not entirely, at least. But it's because they use them as a way of elevating what's already here. Either through taking these story beats from the original cartoon to its logical evolution, like Peri now being a godparent, or as a way of building up this world more, like showing AJ creating a whole magical investigation institute, or perhaps in one of their cooler story beats, reintroducing Foop. I mean, Irep doesn't roll off the tongue nearly as well.
I'm Foop.
Okay, I'm just not realizing that's why they got Eric Bauza to voice Peri, because he voiced Foop in the original series, and of course all the anti-fairies share a voice actor with the regular counterparts. Okay, smart. Despite a pretty ugly design that looks a bit out of place in a show like this, I mean, they weren't given much to work with, let's be fair. I think they introduce Irep in a really cool way. One of my favorite concepts in the Fairly OddParents as a kid came in the Fairy Odd Olympics, where Timmy makes a bet with the anti-fairies and pixies, which states that he promises to become the god kid of whoever wins. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense there though, because we're not given much of a reason as to why they would even want him. It's an episodic series, so the episode just starts with them wanting his attention. However, here, in an incredibly cool combination of story beats, they're playing a similar angle to that, alongside a rule that was only ever mentioned in the Fairy Idol special, where Norm the Genie's whole plan is to convince Cosmo and Wanda to quit so that he can take over as a godparent. With Peri getting increasingly tired of Dev being, well, Dev, he quits, which unknowingly sets I'm just gonna call him Foop, which unknowingly sets Foop up to become Dev's new fairy godparent for them to wreak havoc around the town with rule-free wishes. I'm pretty disappointed this was undone by the end of the episode, but it makes sense. Although it seems like we'll see more of Dev and the anti-fairies, with him not wanting to research them, which will be cool. Either way, this is another seriously cool way of bringing back an older character. And the best part is, Foop fucking sucked. I distinctly remember really liking the episode of Fairly OddParents where Foop was introduced, me and my siblings laughing at his silly British accent. But they started abusing this guy incredibly quickly. All the other anti-fairies disappeared entirely in favor of only ever focusing on him, made even worse once he teams up with Dark Laser and Mr. Crocker to try and take down Timmy like it's all they ever think about. It's when that show completely lost the plot and forgot what it was even about. Like, Crocker didn't want to kill Timmy Turner, he wanted to prove that fairies existed. It just so happens that he suspected Timmy had fairies. But you're like, teamed up with a fairy now, isn't that good enough? Sorry, I could talk about this fucking franchise for hours. More hours. Point is, after a while Foop got real old. And so what I think I can appreciate most about his reappearance in A New Wish is that they're finally doing something new with a character that wasn't even all that good to begin with. I love that this show isn't just acting like the Fairly OddParents ended after season 5. They're embracing the entire series, even the bits that arguably killed the show. I think it's reflective of how these elements they later introduced, like Chloe as I said before, weren't bad ideas, just really poorly executed. In an episode where Hazel and Dev get lost while exploring Fairy World, we see them go to Hocus Pocus, a place where all unwished wishes go. Which, like Father Time, was something introduced in Timmy's Secret Wish all the way in season 8. They make fun nods to Sparky and don't act embarrassed about their history like it would have been very easy for them to do. And the best part is, if they did ignore all that, nobody would have blamed them. Of course you wouldn't want to bring back the dog or the Stewie Griffin baby, but I think it shows a level of ambition on this team's part to bring it all back and try to finally make some of these lesser popular aspects of the Fairly OddParents work. Of course, they still need to have their show stand on its own and not solely be in a reference to the original, but in what we've seen so far, I think they're handling this about as well as you possibly could. It actually makes me excited to see who's going to show up next. My personal hope is for Chester with a grand return by Jason Marsden. Maybe he's coaching the local baseball team. I don't care that everyone suddenly lives in Dimadelphia, who gives a shit? I think the anti-fairies or the pixies could be fun inclusions that would make sense. Always felt there was a lot of missed opportunity with those different factions of the magical realm. Although the sad part with the pixies is you'd probably have to recast them, and unfortunately there goes most of their charm. Either way though, I want to end this by addressing the question that's on everybody's mind. When will Timmy appear? And I think we get so caught up in the prospect of what that could possibly entail that we forget to ask ourselves, should Timmy appear? Of course it would probably tug on our heartstrings unless they made him a bum, that would suck. I'd pray for Channel Chaser's ending to become canon, Alec Baldwin or not, but at the same time, maybe there's something nice about not knowing. The whole point of Timmy getting fairies was to help him grow into a better person despite his poor living conditions. And given that, maybe a more interpretive ending is for the best. What happened to Timmy? Well, whatever you want for him. Although I personally have a fucking great way they could reintroduce Timmy for an episode, but I'm gonna save that discussion for the whole season review as I feel like we've kinda went on for a while here. We've already gotten word that Timmy at the very least won't be appearing in Season 1, which I definitely think is for the best. We definitely don't need him taking the spotlight away from Hazel and making her feel less important to the legacy character. But if a Season 2 does get greenlit, which is becoming increasingly more concerning the closer we get to the end of the first, I'd be interested in seeing how they handle it, because if it's anything like we've seen so far, I'm sure it'll be great. Wholesome ending, guys, perfect.